capital does not disappear. It relocates quietly, legally, systematically. When wealth reaches a certain scale, it no longer remains exposed to public systems. It exits them. It moves into architectures specifically designed to protect it. Architectures that do not break the law. Architectures that are built from it. This briefing examines the offshore system that protects elite capital and explains how money escapes oversight without ever becoming illegal. Offshore finance is often portrayed as criminal, hidden accounts, illegal tax evasion, corruption, secret vaults beyond the reach of law. This image is incomplete and deeply misleading. The modern offshore system is not primarily illegal. It is institutional, structured, formally compliant. Its power does not come from secrecy alone. It comes from legal design. The offshore system begins with jurisdiction. Not all laws apply everywhere. This is not a flaw. It is a feature of the international system. Nations compete for capital. They do so by offering regulatory advantages, low or zero taxation, confidentiality protections, flexible corporate rules, predictable legal environments. These jurisdictions become nodes in a global network optimized for capital protection. This network is not accidental. Offshore jurisdictions are not isolated outposts. They are integrated into global finance. They host banks, trust companies, investment funds, accounting firms, elite law firms. They operate within international frameworks. Their legitimacy comes from recognition, from treaties, from compliance with minimum global standards. They are not outside the system. They are embedded within it. Elite capital enters this system through intermediaries, rarely directly. Private banks, law firms, accounting firms, wealth managers, family offices. These actors do not hide money. They engineer structures tailored precisely to client objectives, asset protection, tax efficiency, liability insulation, succession planning, political risk mitigation. The first layer of this system is corporate, shell companies, holding entities, special purpose vehicles. These entities own assets, but they do not reveal beneficiaries. Ownership is separated from control. Control is separated from visibility. Decision-making authority moves upward. Legal responsibility fragments outward. This fragmentation obscures accountability. While remaining entirely legal, no law is broken. No disclosure requirement is violated. The second layer is trust architecture. Trusts transfer legal ownership, but preserve economic benefit. Assets are no longer owned by individuals. They are owned by legal arrangements. These arrangements complicate claims. They delay enforcement. They shield assets from litigation, seizure, and political pressure. Trust law varies across jurisdictions. This variation is not random. It allows customization, optimization, strategic design. Trusts can be discretionary, irrevocable, layered across multiple jurisdictions. Each layer adds distance. Each layer adds protection. The third layer is financial engineering. Funds within funds, loans within corporate structures, derivatives linked to underlying assets. Ownership becomes exposure. Assets appear liquid while remaining anchored. Capital moves without moving. Value shifts without transfer. Risk is redistributed. Control remains centralized. At scale, these layers interact. Assets move between jurisdictions without changing ownership. Income is reclassified. Profits are deferred. Losses are accelerated. Taxes are minimized without evasion. Oversight becomes fragmented, spread across legal systems that do not coordinate effectively. No single authority sees the full structure. No regulator has total jurisdiction. Each sees a compliant fragment. This system does not rely on secrecy alone. It relies on complexity. Complexity creates plausible deniability. It overwhelms regulators. It raises enforcement costs. It discourages challenge. Investigating offshore structures requires time, resources, coordination, political will. Most enforcement agencies lack all four. Public narratives focus on tax avoidance. But this is only the surface. The deeper function of offshore systems is control. They protect capital from political risk, from legal uncertainty, from democratic pressure. They insulate wealth from policy shifts, from redistribution, from public demand. This insulation has geopolitical consequences. Capital protected offshore exerts influence without accountability. It shapes markets. It funds lobbying. It finances media. It supports political outcomes, all while remaining formally detached. Influence flows without fingerprints. States participate in this system, not passively, actively. Some compete to attract offshore capital. Others tolerate capital outflows to preserve investor confidence. Enforcement is selective. Aggressive pursuit risks capital flight. Restraint preserves participation. This balance is deliberate. Too much enforcement destabilizes markets. Too little invites scrutiny. The system calibrates itself. International reforms attempt to address this. Transparency initiatives, reporting standards, beneficial ownership registries, blacklists, these measures increase friction. At the margins, they do not dismantle the architecture. Capital adapts faster than regulation. When secrecy declines, complexity increases. When reporting expands, structures fragment. When one jurisdiction tightens rules, capital reroutes. The objective never changes. Preserve capital. Avoid exposure. Maintain control. The offshore system also intersects with shadow banking, non-bank financial intermediaries, entities that provide liquidity, leverage, and risk transfer, operating beyond traditional banking regulation. Offshore jurisdictions host these activities. They provide legal shelter, regulatory distance, operational flexibility. Elite capital prefers environments where rules are predictable and enforcement is negotiable. Offshore systems provide both. They offer stability for wealth and flexibility for strategy. The moral debate often misses this structural reality. Offshore finance persists not because of corruption alone, but because global finance is designed to accommodate it. Capital mobility is rewarded. Jurisdictional competition is institutionalized. States benefit, markets benefit, power consolidates. In earlier briefings, we examined black budgets and AI governance. Offshore systems intersect with these domains. Classified funding routes through offshore entities. Strategic investments leverage secrecy jurisdictions. The same architecture serves multiple forms of power: financial, technological, political. This convergence creates resilience, a system that absorbs reform attempts, that adapts without disruption, that remains influential while appearing compliant. Understanding this system is essential because offshore finance is not a loophole. It is a pillar, a structural component of modern power. Analysis complete. In the next restricted briefing, we will examine how shadow banking escapes global regulation and amplifies this system even further. Subscribe to Dark Power Index to access the next restricted briefing file. Access the data